southern trees bear strange fruit, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
She actually patternized everything based upon what she felt. She came within her own in terms of producing her own styles, and just her body expression in terms of singing jazz. You can feel that, and that's what I love about her.
Billie Holiday's voice, with its reluctant, languid purr and a unique play on tempo, helped her stand apart as a truly distinctive and unforgettable musician. Her style, combined with the emotional depth she could carry in her voice, played an integral role in the timeless influence of her musical career. As one of the most influential jazz vocalists in history, Billie Holiday used her extraordinary voice as a protest platform, taking a stand against America's refusal to acknowledge the horrors of racism through her performances of Strange Fruit, for the first time bringing explicitly political themes into mainstream entertainment and creating a public atmosphere of awareness that set the stage for the 1960s civil rights movement. Billie Holiday was born on April 7, 1915 in Philadelphia. Raised by a struggling single mother, Holiday developed an early consciousness of poverty and instability within her family. At the age of 11, she was sexually assaulted by a neighbor and was sent to a reform school. After having difficulties there, she and her mother moved to Harlem, New York, where they were both arrested for prostitution when Holiday was only 13. Desperate to make a living, Holiday auditioned as a singer at a small Harlem club. Her voice caught the attention of producer John Hammond, and her legendary musical career was born in the midst of the cultural boom of the Harlem Renaissance.
When the moon's kind of dreamy, starry-eyed and dreamy.
In the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, Harlem, New York became the heart of a rising African-American cultural identity, poured out through literature, poetry, and art, celebrating their rich heritage. Throughout her career, Holiday carried the spirit of the Harlem Renaissance, articulating the harsh truth of the African-American experience in her repertoire. Although she faced relentless adversities throughout her life, beginning with her childhood, her suffering contributed to the essence of her musicianship, giving the themes in her music raw authenticity and personal relevance. She didn't sing anything unless she had lived it, as singer Tony Bennett remarks. In the racially tense atmosphere of the 30s and 40s, lynching was a topic both uncomfortable and dangerous to discuss openly. According to the Tuskegee Institute, between 1882 and 1968, an estimated 3,959 African Americans were lynched with unspeakable brutality. Lynchings were often carried out as a form of sadistic entertainment, with postcards depicting the lynching distributed afterwards. Participants of the lynching mob were rarely persecuted justly, if at all. Because lynching was an act of murder for an alleged offense that was carried out extrajudicially, the enactment of anti-lynching legislation such as the Dyer Anti-Lynching Bill of 1922, which would have required the persecution of lynching participants under federal law, was continuously prevented by Southern Democrats on the grounds that lynching victims weren't protected under the 14th Amendment promise of equal protection under the law. In the decades before the 1960s, racism of all forms remained unaddressed, both by Congress and the American public. As the composer Marcus Miller explains, the 60s hadn't happened yet. Things like that weren't talked about. They certainly weren't sung about. Abel Meeropol, a Jewish New York schoolteacher, had written a song titled Strange Fruit after seeing a haunting photograph of the lynchings of Thomas Shipp and Abram Smith. The lyrics gave an evocative depiction of the lynching of a black man, the juxtaposition of the peaceful Southern imagery with the graphic details producing a bitterly ironic effect. He gave the song to Barney Josephson, the owner of a cabaret club, who then asked Holiday to perform it. She was hesitant at first, in fear of violent retaliation, but eventually she committed herself to the song, in part because the song reminded her of her father, who had died because the hospital refused to provide treatment to blacks. She began closing almost every show with a performance of Strange Fruit. Jack Schiffman, the owner of the Harlem Apollo Theater, wrote, when she wrenched the final words from her lips, there was not a soul in that audience, black or white, who did not feel half strangled. A moment of oppressively heavy silence followed, and then a kind of rustling sound I had never heard before. It was the sound of almost 2,000 people sighing. Banned from southern radio stations, Holiday's Strange Fruit became a controversial sensation. Abel Mirabel himself observed that she gave a startling, most dramatic and effective interpretation of the song, which could jolt the audience out of its complacency anywhere. And indeed, the combination of Mirabel's chilling lyrics and Holiday's haunting voice articulated to the shocked audience what jazz pianist Leonard Feather calls the first significant protest in words and music, the first unmuted cry against racism. Strange Fruit came to stand as a metaphor for the horrific 1939 reality of an America whose 13th Amendment had abolished slavery 80 years before, yet had failed to eradicate racism, only driving it underground. The stagnant social state of America was in desperate need of a catalyst. 16 years before Rosa Parks gave her famous Act of Defiance in Montgomery, and 24 years before Dr. King delivered his momentous speech in Washington, D.C., Holiday sang of lynching, providing that first spark. It was more than revolutionary. She made a statement that we all felt as Black folks. No one was speaking out. She became one of the fighters, this beautiful lady who could sing and make you feel things. Drummer Max Roach. Strange Fruit was described by author David Margolick as a song that forced a nation to confront its darkest impulses, a song that maligned an entire portion of the country. Taking on the responsibility of such a song made her and Strange Fruit inextricably tied together, and she endured cruel and prejudiced treatment on a daily basis throughout her career, with audience members attacking her both verbally and physically.
It is extremely powerful, and it's why it was banned, it's why it caused riots, it's why it helped destroy Billie Holiday's life.
The endless barrage of racial attacks, combined with her harsh childhood, abusive marriages, and being relentlessly targeted by law enforcement, led to the jazz legend's fall into depression, drugs, and alcohol. She sacrificed the success of her career and even her own health and happiness to take a stand in her powerful rendition of Strange Fruit. On July 17, 1959, Holiday died at the age of 44 from complications arising from her drug addiction while handcuffed to her hospital bed under arrest for narcotics possession. No people sing with such pure voices as those who live in hell. What we take for the song of the angels is their song. Franz Kafka, 20th century German novelist. Through Strange Fruit, Holiday brought the political arena of 1939 into conventional music, bridging the gap between music and social consciousness for the first time. Whereas other protest songs in the past had functioned primarily as propaganda, the iconic song demonstrated that musical protest could have monumental social and political effects that transcend time, while still retaining the aesthetic qualities of art. Holiday's work has inspired generations of distinguished musicians who have followed her lead and employed their medium in the quest for social justice.
We will shape and mold this country, or it will not be molded and shaped at all anymore. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times? That, to me, is the definition of an artist.
Strange Fruit served as what record producer Ahmet Erdogan calls a declaration of war, the beginning of the civil rights movement. In 2005, the U.S. Senate issued a formal apology for failing to enact anti-lynching legislation, where Senator Mary Landrieu acknowledged Billie Holiday and Strange Fruit's role in the fight for civil rights, declaring,
"Something in the way she sang this song, something in the pictures that describe the event must have touched the heart of Americans because they began to mobilize. And men and women, white and black, people from different backgrounds, came to stand up and begin to speak."
By giving a voice to the silenced Black community, Holiday's rendition of Strange Fruit inspired others to take a stand, and these people generated the mass movement that was needed to finally be heard after centuries of oppression. As Angela Davis, a prominent Black activist, puts it, Strange Fruit almost single-handedly changed the politics of American popular culture and put the elements of protest and resistance back at the center of contemporary Black musical culture. The felt impact of Holiday's performance of Strange Fruit is as powerful today as it was in the 1940s.
Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck. Here is a strange bitter cry.